He humiliated me, walked away, and thought he won. But when his world crashed, no one came to save him. You'll never be anything. Just accept it. His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. Then came the laughter. Sharp. Mocking. Not just from him, from everyone watching. I felt the heat rise in my face, my hands clenching into fists. I wanted to say something. To fight back. But I didn't. Because deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. He had already won. At least, that's what he thought. I looked around. The crowded cafeteria. The amused smirks. The whispers. No one stood up for me. No one ever did. And that was the moment I realized I was alone. At least, for now. Because what he didn't know, karma was already coming for him. And when it hit, no one would be there to save him. I walked out of the cafeteria, keeping my head down. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. My fingers were shaking. Not from fear. From rage. This wasn't the first time he humiliated me. But it would be the last. Because I had finally had enough. I wasn't planning to fight him. I wasn't planning to beg for respect. No. I was going to destroy him. And I wouldn't have to throw a single punch to do it. That night, I sat in my room, staring at my phone. I could expose him right now. One message. One post. And his entire life would fall apart. But no. That was too easy. If I wanted this to hurt, I had to do it right. So I took a deep breath, steadied my hands, and sent the first text. Not to him. To someone with real power. And once they saw what I had, there was no coming back for him. I barely slept that night. My mind was racing, heart pounding. Because for the first time ever, I wasn't powerless. I wasn't just going to take it. I was going to watch him fall. And the best part? He wouldn't even see it coming. The next morning, I walked into school like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Because the second I stepped into the hallway, I felt it. A shift. Whispers. Glances. People looking at him. Not me. Him. And he noticed. For the first time, he wasn't the center of attention for the right reasons. He frowned, his eyes flicking across the hallway, confused. He didn't like not knowing what was happening. But that was the beauty of it. I did. Because I had started something last night. And today, it was about to spread like wildfire. It started small. A rumor. A quiet conversation in the back of the classroom. Did you hear? No way. That can't be true. I dunno. I mean, it kinda makes sense, right? I sat at my desk, pretending not to hear. But inside, I was waiting. Because rumors don't just stay rumors. They grow. They fester. And eventually, they explode. And his perfect little life was about to detonate. Lunch came, and he still had no idea what was happening. I could see it in the way he carried himself, trying to act normal, but something was off. His usual cocky swagger? A little too forced. His laugh? A little too loud. He could feel it. The shift. The weight of something creeping up behind him. And he didn't know what it was. But he would. Soon. Because the next phase of my plan was already in motion. And once it hit, there was no turning back. By the time the last bell rang, the whispers had turned into something more. People weren't just talking behind his back anymore. They were looking at him differently. The same students who once laughed at his jokes, the ones who used to hang on his every word, now they weren't so sure. And he felt it. I could see it in the way his jaw clenched. The way his eyes flicked from group to group in the hallway, scanning, searching, trying to figure out who started it. But he wouldn't. Because I was too smart for that. I wasn't going to make it obvious. I was going to let the truth do the work for me. That night, I stayed up late. Not because I was anxious, but because I wanted to watch. And the internet? Never sleeps. By midnight, I saw the first post. A simple question on a private student forum. Hey, has anyone else noticed how weird it is that he never actually does his own work? I stared at the screen, heartbeat steady. I hadn't written that. But someone else had. And that meant the dominoes were falling on their own now. This wasn't just a rumor anymore. It was a movement. And once a movement starts, you can't stop it. The next morning, the tension in the school was thick. Everywhere I turned, people were whispering. checking their phones, looking at him. And he knew. He walked in like he always did, head high, that fake confidence oozing off him. But this time, it wasn't working. Because confidence only works when people believe in you. And today, no one did. At lunch, I took my usual seat at the far end of the cafeteria. And then it happened. One of his so-called friends sat down across from him. Dude, just be real with us. Did you cheat? The table went silent. For the first time, people were questioning him. Not me. Him. I watched as his expression flickered, just for a second. Then, he let out a laugh. Loud. Forced. Are you serious? Who even started this? His voice was calm, but his hands? They were clenched into fists. Because the thing about guys like him? They thrive on control. And the second they feel it slipping, they panic. I didn't have to say a word. I just had to watch him unravel. And the best part? The worst was still coming. By the next morning, the shift was impossible to ignore. Something had changed. The usual hallway dynamic, the one where he walked in like he owned the place, where people moved out of his way, where laughter followed him, was gone. People weren't looking at him with admiration anymore. They were looking at him with doubt. And doubt? Spreads like wildfire. I made sure to arrive at school early, just so I could watch it unfold. The second he stepped through the doors, the whispers started. This time, they weren't behind his back. They were right in front of him. I heard he never actually did his own work. Dude, my cousin said he paid someone to take his exams. If that's true, he's screwed. His shoulders tensed, but he kept walking, pretending like nothing was wrong. But I saw it, the crack in his confidence. And cracks? Only get bigger. By second period, it got worse. Because the teachers? They had started to notice. I watched from my seat as one of them scanned the classroom, eyes narrowing as they lingered on him. Then, a call over the intercom. Please report to the principal's office. He barely reacted. Just rolled his eyes, sighed dramatically, grabbed his bag. But as he walked past me, our eyes met. For a split second, I saw it. The fear. He had no idea who was behind this. And that was the best part. Because the unknown terrifies people like him. At lunch, I sat alone, picking at my food. Then, out of nowhere, a voice. Hey! I looked up. It was one of his friends. Or, at least, someone who used to be. They slid into the seat across from me, lowering their voice. You heard the rumors, right? I raised an eyebrow. Who hasn't? They hesitated, glancing over their shoulder before leaning in. Okay, between you and me, do you think it's true? I let out a small, amused breath. Because the thing was, I already knew the truth. But instead of answering, I just shrugged. Guess we'll find out soon enough. And we would. Because the walls were closing in on him. And he had nowhere left to run. By the time the final bell rang, the entire school had heard the rumors. But they weren't just rumors anymore. They were growing teeth. Because now, teachers were getting involved. And once that happens, there's no stopping it. I watched from my locker as he walked down the hall, head held high, pretending like nothing was wrong. But I could see it. The way his shoulders were a little too stiff. The way his eyes darted from side to side, scanning the crowd. He felt it. The shift. And then it happened. A teacher stepped out of a classroom just as he passed by. Hey, you, wait up. The hallway went silent. He stopped mid-stride, turning slowly. Yeah? His voice was calm, but his fingers twitched against his backpack strap. The teacher held up a folder. Thick. Heavy. We need to talk. That was it. That was the moment. The exact second he realized. He was screwed. I didn't stick around to watch him go into the office. I didn't have to. Because I already knew what was happening behind that door. And no matter how hard he tried, no amount of charm, no amount of fast talking, no amount of manipulation would get him out of this. Because this time, the truth was stronger than his lies. That night, I checked my phone. I had expected to see something. A desperate post. A vague status update. A cryptic message. But there was nothing. Silence. And silence was louder than anything he could have said. I smirked, tossing my phone onto my nightstand. Because now, the real fun was about to begin. The next morning, I could tell something had shifted. The school felt different. Usually, when he walked in, the whole place moved around him. People made space, laughed at his jokes, watched him like he was some kind of celebrity. But today, nobody moved. Nobody looked at him. Nobody spoke to him. Like he wasn't even there. Like he was nothing. And that terrified him. I leaned against my locker, pretending not to notice. But I was watching. Every nervous glance. Every twitch of his fingers. The way his shoulders tensed when he realized he was alone. I could practically hear his thoughts. Who started this? Who's talking? Who can I shut up before it's too late? But he was asking the wrong questions. Because it was already too late. By third period, the storm had officially hit. I was in class when I saw it. The second phone screen lighting up. Then another. Then another. A wave of people checking their notifications, scrolling furiously, eyes widening. I pulled out my own phone and glanced down. And there it was. A screenshot. A very specific screenshot. Of an email. An email from a teacher. Confirming that his work was under review. That the school had received multiple concerns about his academic record. And the final line? Due to the nature of the situation, disciplinary action may be required. My heart pounded with satisfaction. Because this wasn't just a rumor anymore. This was real. I glanced up from my screen, just in time to see him storm out of the classroom. His face was red. His hands were clenched into fists. And I knew exactly where he was going. Straight to the principal's office. Straight to his last chance. And when that didn't work, there'd be nothing left for him to do but fall. And this time, nobody would be there to catch him. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to. Because I knew exactly what was happening behind that office door. And whatever he was trying to do, it wouldn't work. Not this time. I stayed in my seat, watching the clock tick by. 10 minutes. 15. 30. By the time lunch rolled around, he still hadn't come back. And when I finally saw him again, I almost didn't recognize him. Because for the first time in his life, he looked afraid. He walked through the cafeteria doors, head down, steps stiff. No smirk. No fake confidence. Just a guy who had lost control of his own life. I watched as he made his way toward his usual table. The one filled with his so-called friends. Except now, they weren't looking at him like a leader. They were looking at him like a liability. And the second he sat down, one of them stood up. Dude, I can't be part of this. Another grabbed their tray. Yeah, man. Sorry, but this is bad. One by one, they left. And soon, he was alone. I expected him to lash out, to get angry. But instead, he just sat there, silent. And that's when it hit me. He knew. He finally understood. This wasn't just a bad day. This wasn't something he could talk his way out of. His life was falling apart. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. I stood up, grabbed my tray, and walked past him. For the first time ever, he didn't even look at me. No insult. No glare. Just empty, defeated silence. Because now, he was the one at the bottom. And nobody cared enough to help him up. I didn't expect him to approach me. Not after everything. Not after the years he spent tearing me down like it was a game. But that's the thing about people like him, they only crawl back when they have nowhere else to go. It was the end of the day. I was at my locker, unbothered, calm. The halls had mostly emptied out. And then I heard it. His voice. Quiet. Strained. Hey. I didn't turn around. Not right away. I wanted him to feel what I'd felt all those times he ignored me. But he waited. So finally, I shut my locker and looked at him. He stood there like a shadow of who he used to be. No smug grin. No cocky posture. Just defeat. Can we talk? He asked. I didn't say anything. He took that as a yes. We sat on the steps outside school. A place where he used to hold court, surrounded by people hanging on his every word. Now, it was just us. I know you hate me, he started. Still no response from me. Because honestly, hate wasn't even the right word anymore. What I felt now was nothing. He went on anyway. I messed up. Bad. I thought I could control everything. People, situations, even you. He gave a short, bitter laugh. Turns out I couldn't even control myself. I watched him. Not because I cared, but because I was curious. What does a person look like when they realize they've lost everything? This is what they look like. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. Good. Because I wouldn't. But I just needed to say it. I was wrong. About everything. He waited again, like he was hoping I'd say something. Offer him some kind of closure. But I didn't. Because this wasn't about him anymore. This was about me. And me? I was finally free. After that day, he stopped trying. He didn't talk to anyone. Didn't look anyone in the eye. He moved through the hallways like a ghost. The guy who once ruled the school like a king, now he couldn't even hold a conversation without flinching. He didn't have power anymore. And when people like him lose power, they disappear. The school didn't announce anything officially. Of course they didn't. But we all knew. The review into his academic record had found exactly what I expected it to. Fake assignments. Plagiarized essays. Payments to other students. They didn't expel him immediately. Too many politics. Too many strings to pull. But his reputation? That was gone. And for someone like him, that's worse than any suspension. His parents came to the school one day. I saw them through the front office window, tense, uncomfortable, whispering to the principal. They looked nothing like the perfect family he bragged about. No smiles. No confidence. Just people trying to keep a grip on something that was already slipping. Rumors swirled that they had no idea what he'd been doing. That they were embarrassed. That they had cut him off. No more allowance. No more lies about college scouts or exclusive programs. He wasn't their golden boy anymore. Just a liability. I passed him in the hallway a few days later. He was leaning against a locker, staring at the floor. Alone. He looked up just as I walked by. Our eyes met. There was no challenge in his stare anymore. No superiority. Just emptiness. Like he was hoping for someone, anyone, to acknowledge him. I didn't. I walked past without a word. And that silence said everything. Because for the first time, he understood. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't payback. This was justice. And justice doesn't need to scream. It just walks away. Graduation came faster than anyone expected. People were excited, taking pictures in the hallways, talking about colleges and summer plans. But no one talked about him. Not anymore. He still showed up, technically. But not really. He kept his head down. Walked quietly. Ate alone. He was just there. A shadow of the guy who used to make everyone else feel small. Now, no one even noticed him. And that silence? That was the real punishment. I was in the gym for senior awards night. All the names being called. All the clapping. He sat in the back row. I saw him. And for a split second, he looked at me. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. But I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Not anger. Not ego. Just understanding. Like he finally realized what he'd done. And what it had cost him. After the ceremony, I walked past him as people gathered for photos. He didn't try to stop me this time. He didn't say anything. He just watched. Like a person who finally understood they weren't the main character in the story anymore. Because I was. I had always been. I just hadn't known it yet. People still ask me sometimes if I ever forgave him. I tell them no. But not because I'm bitter. I didn't need to forgive him. I just needed to let go. And I did. Completely. They say revenge is best served cold. But the truth is, the best revenge is not needing any at all. He thought he could humiliate me and walk away. But in the end, I walked away, and he couldn't even lift his head. He wasn't destroyed. He just faded. And no one cared enough to ask where he went. Not even me.